Starting with the lining fabric. This is actually what we call a dobby weave. The threads actually have a surface to them. They stand a little bit away from the navy. So the right side of the fabric is out and the wrong side is what I'm opening up. And I'm going to make French seams. So I will start by putting wrong sides together. We have a 3/4 inch seam allowance down the side seams. I have the two front pieces on the table and I'm laying the back piece on top, matching the side seams to the front. Finding my notches and pinning them right on top of each other. You can start with this kind of fabric at the top or bottom of the skirt. With really flimsy fabrics, I usually work from wide to narrow, and I am on this seam, but either way is fine. So this is a normal stitch, 10 to 12 stitches per inch or more if you choose. I back tacked at the beginning and end of the seam, just 1 or 2 stitches, so that the seam doesn't come apart while I'm working with it. And then pinning the other side seams together. Repeating the same process, stitching at 3/8 of an inch, back tacking at either end of the seam, now pressing the seam flat to embed the stitches into the fabric. pressing the seam open. This makes for a very flat seam if you press a French seam open first before you flip the fabric and stitch the second line, which you'll understand in just a moment. On some fabrics, it's easier and works better not to press the fabric open because it might fray, but this fabric does not fray a lot. And now to trim the seam allowance down. I would trim it to 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch. You don't want to trim it so much that it pulls the seam apart, but this has to be narrower than 3/8 because when I flip the fabrics to create the second seam, as you will see in a moment, this little seam has to fit within the next seam allowance, and that will be 3/8 of an inch. So this has to be less than 3/8 of an inch, much less. This is the wrong side of the fabric. And now I'm pressing right sides together along that seam line. I pinned it into the fabric surface of the under table so that it would stabilize it while I work. You want to make sure that that seam is right in the middle of the fold. This will help hold those two layers of fabric together without shifting while you stitch the next seam. And now to stitch the second seam to create the French seam. I am using a 3/8 inch seam allowance. And now I will have used up the entire 3/4 of an inch seam allowance from the pattern. Repeating the same thing on the other side seam. Pressing the two side seams on top of each other just to embed the stitches. And then pressing them toward the back. I'm pressing on the right side now to make sure that those side seams are good and flat. You can see that they kind of roll up, but once I press them from the outside, a final press, they flatten out beautifully. And this, of course, is the right side of the fabric.